Every CEO's journey has its Everest. The moments when the path forward feels steep, uncertain, and alone. With Sherpa CEO coaching, you don't climb alone. Our experienced coaches are your guides, helping you break through barriers, sharpen your strategy, strengthen your leadership, and build a team that can carry you higher. With tailored one-on-one coaching, strategic planning, and real accountability, your summit is within reach. Sherpa CEO Coaching, your guide to confidence, clarity, and extraordinary business growth. Get coached and learn more at sherpaceo.com.
Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Journey with your host, Dave Wescott. The Entrepreneurial Journey is a weekly podcast that streams live every Tuesday at 9:15 a.m. Pacific on Dave's YouTube channel and LinkedIn profile. Now here's Dave with this week's episode.
Good morning and welcome to the Entrepreneurial Journey. I'm your host, Dave Wescott, and this morning I have with me special guest, Beau Turner, founder and CEO of Abundant Minds. Good morning, Beau.
Morning, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I'm glad you're here. You know, this is the first time I have ever spoken with somebody who does Bitcoin mining. And that is really interesting, right, to me. It's not like the Minecraft game where we're out there digging holes and turning things into squares. And it's not like a mine that we got out in the middle of, I don't know, some foreign country and we're digging big holes. But this is happening in the computer, right?
Yeah, mining is it's a funny word to use for it because it doesn't really map to reality, but it's kind of the closest analogy we have for it in the real world. I think the origin of the term was to compare it to gold mining, since it's the same kind of energy intensive process to get some raw material that you're looking for.
I like that. The cost of gold keeps going up. The cost of Bitcoins, it seems, keeps going up. So just for the listeners out there who may not understand or know exactly how you mine a Bitcoin, will you walk us through that process just so that we have a little bit of background for exactly how this works?
Absolutely. Well, this could be a very long explanation. It could be very technical, so I'll try to keep it really simple and high level. Essentially, what we're doing when we're mining Bitcoin is we're taking energy in the form of electricity. We're running it through a computing process, and that's happening with millions of machines all around the world at the same time. And all of those computers are competing to find the next Bitcoin. And in the process of doing that, they are doing two things. They're securing the network, essentially putting up a cybersecurity force that protects the entire Bitcoin network. And they're also processing transactions. So they're helping you and me actually use what the Bitcoin network is meant for, which is to move value across it. So we do two jobs in a very kind of unconventional way. Underneath the hood, it really looks like a worldwide lottery system that's going off every 10 minutes and has hundreds of trillions of numbers going at it every second. But in essence, all we're doing is taking energy and using it to protect this network that we call the Bitcoin network.
Okay, I like it. So if I was to write it in some sort of Excel formula, I'd get energy equals computer equals Bitcoin equals secure networking equals processing transaction equals wealth and happiness.
I couldn't come up with a better equation on the fly. That's a pretty good summary.
Okay, I like it. That's what I'm hearing. So what is exactly a Bitcoin?
So Bitcoin, people think it's this physical artifact, and I would pull one over, but it must be on a different part of my desk. But people think, I hold up this coin and it's a Bitcoin, or I hold up a phone and I've got a Bitcoin because I've got a wallet on it. But really, all that Bitcoin is a reference to something in a database.
Okay.
So if you think of it, the best analogy I've found that seems to land with people is the Bitcoin network is like a giant glass wall of PO boxes where you can see what everybody has in their PO box all around the world. Everything that's on the network is totally public, but you can only take action on your PO box. You've got the key to do something with yours. You can move things from one PO box to the other. But all that you're doing is referencing information that's in this shared database that we all have access to. I mean, you can run the Bitcoin network, the full copy of it on a laptop if you'd like to. And there's hundreds of thousands of people around the world that do so. And so you can think of it as this shared database that we all have access to. Only some of us have permissions to move certain funds, i.e., if I've got the key to my PO box, I can move my funds, but I can't move yours. But in essence, all it is an information product. So if gold is this bearer asset that we've all come to know and love as investors because you can actually hold it in your hand and take it with you, nobody can seize it from you if you've got it properly protected. Bitcoin is the same thing, just in the information world.
Okay. And what does a Bitcoin contain?
That's a great question. I've never actually been asked that.
Okay.
So the technical answer is that a Bitcoin contains, if say I've got a wallet balance of say 1 Bitcoin, all that is a reference to different what are called UTXOs, which are unspent transaction outputs. So if you think of it, analogies are the best way to kind of wrap your head around this. A UTXO is sort of like how you have different forms of small bills and change that you carry in a wallet. So I might have 1 Bitcoin that's what shows up on my wallet interface. I've got 1 Bitcoin, but that Bitcoin is made up of different transaction pieces that are all kind of cobbled together. You think of like quarters and nickels and dollar bills and fives. I've probably got in a single Bitcoin wallet, and this is just an example, this could be anything. Let's say 20 unspent transaction outputs of a bunch of different amounts. And when I'm sending you Bitcoin, what's happening is the network is essentially making the right amount of change to send you, if I've got a Bitcoin and I'm sending you 1/10 of a Bitcoin, it's going to assemble the right pieces in the right order and quantities and essentially make change in real time and send you a new UTXO, a new unspent transaction output that will land in your wallet and be one of those bills, if you will, that's sitting in your wallet.
Okay. So now we've got an understanding of what the Bitcoins are, and thank you very much for that. I'm sure you have to do that all the time. But now we understand what the Bitcoins are, and you are CEO and founder of Abundant Minds. And so you are working in this all the time. Now, you didn't start your journey there. You were in real estate before, right?
It was.
Okay. And so were you selling residential property, commercial property? What were you selling?
So I wasn't actually selling real estate. I was a full-time investor and entrepreneur. So I would actually go out and find deals, occasionally, assign those deals to other real estate investors who wanted to take them down. That's what's known as wholesaling or contract assignment. But we also built our own portfolio of residential and commercial properties. So I was a deal finder, a deal maker, and then also a portfolio builder. And 2020 was the first sign of me wanting to do something different. I had been in real estate for about 10 years, coming out of engineering school. And 2020 was that first big shift for me of re-looking at Bitcoin, not as just this sort of speculative technology that was sort of interesting, but actually as a really legitimate global treasury asset that was starting to be birthed into the world. And this was when Michael Saylor was starting to come on the scene and really talk about it. He was the first kind of very public company who pivoted their treasury into holding Bitcoin. And that coincided with a lot of people having new information, a new look on this industry. And really, I think a lot of people found him to be the first very respectable kind of theory and engineering focused allocator of capital who could give credibility to thinking about this asset as not just something that you hold a little bit of for speculation, but truly a treasury reserve asset and kind of rewriting the mental framework for a lot of people.
Okay, so what I hear is in 2020, this thing becomes real. 2021, this thing becomes real because of Michael Saylor and him really turning this into an asset that you could bank against. Is that right?
You could say that we got our first really legitimate champion.
Okay, the first legitimate champion comes in. And so do you still play with real estate or are you completely out of that?
In terms of my personal portfolio, I'm completely out. So 2021, we started selling property. It took 3 years for us to liquidate everything. So 2024 was when we were fully out personally, and that's when I would consider myself completely done with real estate. However, I do like to qualify this because the irony of this is that I really just traded the form of real estate that we're working with, since we're working with data centers instead of homes and commercial buildings.
Sure.
So a little bit of nuance there, but my primary exposure is to the Bitcoin network in terms of where my net worth lies.
Okay, that's cool. And what made you want to get out of the real estate?
It was a lot of things. There's the kind of entrepreneurial side of just sort of losing the energy where I felt like I could be a real force for change in that industry. I didn't see it as the place where I was meant to be.
Okay.
And so that's sort of an underlying just energetic component. The other side of it was very compelling to me in 2020 that the whole world was shutting down. For whatever reason, my property portfolio went up by 20, 30% in some cases. That didn't make any sense to me. And it gave me a window into how correlated even what we perceive as the safest assets in the world are to the expansion of the money supply. And that was what led me back to relooking at Bitcoin as this sort of uncorrelated parallel system that didn't have that same sort of exposure and systemic risk that any other asset that's tied to a debt-based monetary system does. So that's the intellectual answer. The heart answer is that I saw no real serious impact that I could have in real estate. Rightly or wrongly, plenty of people have amazing contribution-filled lives working in real estate. So I'm not discrediting anybody that has that experience. But for me, I was always drawn to technology, always drawn to innovation, always drawn to things that people misunderstand or even resist because they don't fully understand. And Bitcoin really checked all those boxes. And Bitcoin mining especially, if you think people don't like Bitcoin mining is, or at least was, one of the most hated industries at the time that I was getting into it. And I thought that that was just unreasonable because I saw the environmental good that it could do. I saw what it did for energy systems. I saw this totally other picture of what the industry was actually doing versus what it was being portrayed as. And I don't know if it's just falling in love with an underdog story, but that's what called me.
That's what got you there.
I could make a difference.
That's what rang the bell. So let me get this right. So you have this nice investment portfolio in real estate. You've got properties, residential, commercial. We go through basically the pandemic. The world is shutting down, and what you say is, wait a minute, my portfolio went up 20, 30%. This isn't real. This is unsafe. Even though I can hold it, walk on it, look at it, see it, build upon it, this is not real. I'm going to jump into the thing that everybody thinks is not real, which is Bitcoin. I'm going feet first. And basically, I'm going to say that this, debt-driven property ownership program is not where the real future is. And I don't know if this is the right word. It's almost a lie, but I'm not going to fall into that. I'm moving out and I'm going into Bitcoin, which, in my mind is completely like, whoa, and so you do this, you make this jump, totally counterintuitive, and here you are today. Is that right?
You got it right. And my friends in real estate thought I was absolutely insane. They thought it was hilarious and really didn't understand when I said, no, this is my risk off move. This is what I'm doing to keep my wealth safe. No,
that's what I'm saying right now. That's what I'm saying right now. That's what I'm saying. Wait a minute. But it's really it's really exciting, right? Like to talk to you about this. I mean, it's really cool because, your perspective on this is, it's awesome. So I got to know, I'm looking at this thing. I'm just thinking of it like I got one piece of paper that says Bitcoin, one piece of paper that says real estate investments, and I'm weighing out the pros and the cons, and I'm doing research on it, and I'm deciding what it is. What is it in Bitcoin that gave you that feeling of safety net, that feeling of security, that feeling of just, this is the move I'm making. I'm not going 10% in. I'm going all in. And by the way, I'm selling everything I have on the real estate portfolio. And this is going to be my journey. What are some of those things? I mean, you mentioned checking the boxes. What are some of those things that check the boxes?
Well, I think, I had a little bit of an advantage having a technical background. So most people that are looking at Bitcoin for the first time don't have the eyes and the wiring to see what is in front of them. So I benefited from, engineering studies and computer science in college. I had parents and grandparents who were very much sold on sound money and gold. So I had some of the sound money wiring. So I had the ability to see what I was looking at when Bitcoin entered my world. And so I just sort of was more naturally open than I think most people would be. And what I found the more that I studied it, and the key to this, I think, for anybody in any investment is education is definitely a catalyst toward very serious action if you are going down the path. So the more that I was educated, the more convicted I was in the choice. But what was really the big thing for me was I recognized that there is no other system on Earth that was this robust in terms of its ability to weather extreme events in the world. That sounds funny when you think of, computers and protocols and the internet and, things that have fragility. But the way that this network was designed was essentially so that it could survive any human catastrophe. And the second component of that was it's our first true monetary system that's tied to energy in the way that the petrodollar tries to be tied to energy. Gold is tied to energy in the sense that it takes energy to get it out of the ground. There's a fixed cost, and so that naturally breeds scarcity. And what's unique about Bitcoin is it's the first perfectly scarce asset that we've ever invented or discovered, however you want to think of it. Sort of like discovering the number zero. You just figured out that there's this sort of constant in the universe that references everything else and orients everything else. And Bitcoin is our invention of true perfect scarcity, where there will never be more than 21 million coins ever. And it's enforced by an open protocol like the internet, like TCP/IP, that everybody can opt into. Nobody is forced into. It's not a coercive protocol. And it's essentially the first grassroots monetary movement that has ever existed like this. And it solves so many of the problems with our current monetary system and all the different forms of money that came before that it was so compelling to me I couldn't look away. Is really the truth of it. I could have continued going on with my head in the sand as if I didn't see what I saw, but what I saw was just like the iPhone or just like, a compelling piece of technology like AI, when you truly experience it for what it is, you can't go back to what you knew before then. You can't go back to not knowing what is in front of you. It's the bringing of fire to the people. Nothing is ever the same after that. And most people are not quite there in their journey, but that is what I believe you start to understand the more time that you spend studying this.
That's very compelling. There's 21 million coins. Is that what you said?
21 million coins, of which we've already mined 20 million of them as of a few weeks ago.
Okay, and how do they know that there's 21 million coins?
So just like I said earlier, when we've got this glass PO box everybody can see, we can see exactly how many coins are ever going to be mined based on the software. So the protocol itself governs the rules of, think like the Federal Reserve. You've got people in a room deciding what is the price of money and how much are we going to issue. The difference between the Federal Reserve and Bitcoin is that Bitcoin hard-coded its monetary supply so that we can see everything that's going to happen for the next 150 years. The last Bitcoin's not going to be mined for another 115 years. It'll be the year 2140 is when the last Bitcoin actually comes onto the network, at which point miners like me just survive on transaction fees. But it's a perfectly known quantity that's verified by hundreds of thousands of people all around the world and who have an incentive to keep the rule set honest.
And how do you know this? I mean, how come they can't just go in and be like, oh, we're going to make 1 million more Bitcoins?
Because the rules are set and agreed to by everybody who participates in the network. So in order for you to do something like that, let's say, double the total supply or give somebody preferential allocation of Bitcoin, you'd have to get every single node on the network to agree with that protocol update, of which, again, there's hundreds of thousands of live reachable nodes around the world. And that's not in everybody's interest. So you think just as challenging as it is to change things in the political sphere and get people to agree on policy changes, you have to get lots of people with very different interests around the world to agree on any sort of policy change in Bitcoin. So it's been very slow. And essentially, the way that the protocol was released in 2009, we've got fundamentally all of the same things that were in place at that point. The only difference is we've gotten some user interface upgrades. It's a little bit easier to use. We've changed a few kind of logistical parts of how the network runs, but the rule set has been, and foreseeably will always be, this essential set of fixed supply at 21 million, difficulty adjustment, issuance schedule. All of these different things have been in motion and really can't be changed unless you get agreement from everybody who's on the network.
Is there one particular entity or group of people that own Bitcoin?
That's why it's so amazing. I say grassroots financial system because even the inventor, who some people might be familiar with, you've heard the name Satoshi Nakamoto. This is the inventor of Bitcoin, who's anonymous, has a million coins sitting across several different wallets. We have no idea who it is. But the beauty of it is that even the creator, even the contributors, have no outsized control over the protocol. So I mentioned Michael Saylor earlier. He's got 700 and something thousand Bitcoin, more than 3% of the supply, the largest single corporate holder in the world. He has no extra influence over the protocol than, me or anybody else sitting with less than a coin. And that's part of what makes it incredible, is that in every other monetary system, including other crypto systems, there's typically some person or some group that's got control, some sort of preferential issuance. And what's amazing about Bitcoin is that it's open source. It was freely released to the public. It was opt-in participation from the beginning. There was no initial allocation to anybody. It was free participation from the moment that it was released. And that is unique in that there is no owner, there is no controller, there's nobody who can exert undue influence on the network from the network.
And what is the value of a Bitcoin today?
I don't check the price quite as often as I used to. I'd say it's sitting around 70,000 a coin. We've been flip-flopping between like 65 and 75,000 for the last couple of months.
Okay, so it's around $70,000 a coin. And what do you do with the coins? I mean, can you go into Starbucks and buy your Starbucks with a Bitcoin change, or how are people using it from a transaction standpoint?
So this is a great question. It brings up a good point. Is most people, when they think of money, they think of how they use it in their daily lives. And that naturally lends to this sort of medium of exchange use case where we're thinking about buying things that we would use on a day-to-day basis. But the first problem that Bitcoin is solving is the store value problem. So before you can transact with it, before anybody wants to transact with it, they have to believe that it's worth holding on to in the first place. And so I say this because this has been the focus of the first era of Bitcoin, is does it hold value? And it's been one of, if not the best performing asset over its lifetime. So we can say, sure, it pretty reliably seems to hold value over time. So the next use case for money is what you just described. Can I spend it places? And we're still very early in that. You can. There are lots of merchants that take it. Actually, one of the biggest unlocks recently is that Block, the company behind the Square terminals, just enabled automatic Bitcoin payments on every terminal. So anybody that you see with a Square terminal could actually accept a Bitcoin payment, and that merchant would get fewer fees than if you paid with a card because they're using Bitcoin as their settlement layer. So we're starting to see this adoption of Bitcoin as a medium of exchange where you can actually use it to pay for things and essentially live your life on it. There are people that work at my company who live completely on a Bitcoin standard. So they don't have US bank accounts. They're doing everything on some Bitcoin related rail when it comes to paying their bills, buying their groceries, everything. They're actually living on Bitcoin. And it's not that many people at this point in the world, but growing. And I'm sure you'll see quite a few more over the next few years. But I say that because we're still early in Bitcoin being used as this, I'm just going to go buy my daily coffee with it. Once enough people start using it in that way, then you get to critical mass and have enough time elapse and people start thinking of it as a unit of account. And that's really the goal. That's really, if you're going to be a settlement layer, if you're going to be the monetary layer for the world, people have to think of their lives denominated in that unit of account. Right now, the unit of account for the world is the dollar. I mean, there's competition, there's all sorts of stories about, well, the dollar's dying. But right now, the unit of account for pretty much everybody, the way they think of their wealth is the US dollar. And Bitcoin, I believe, has truly succeeded when a critical mass of people think of it as their unit of account.
Okay. So I understand that. Is there enough Bitcoin, 21 million Bitcoin, to support the entire world's infrastructure?
There is. You can subdivide Bitcoin, in theory, infinitely. So you can keep getting smaller and smaller slices of the same thing, even though you're limited to 21 million coins. Right now, there's 8 decimal places. So you can have 100 million slices of a Bitcoin, which we would call a Satoshi or a sat. And so those are sort of like the cent denomination of a Bitcoin. And right now, there's no issue with that. This will bring up some probably cognitive dissonance for people, but when you say that, sometimes people will say, well, there's an infinite supply then if you can keep subdividing it forever. But the pie isn't actually getting bigger if you're just adding more decimal points to subdivide it smaller and smaller. So I just want to make that clarification, that this is a fixed supply asset that we can divide into infinitely many pieces if we need to. And it's part of why we struggle to run a monetary system on gold, is that at some point that becomes impractical as a settlement layer. And you can't keep subdividing it to, smaller and smaller denominations of coins that are essentially microscopic. But you can do that in a digital world.
So at some point, a coin's going to be worth $1 million, $2 million, $10 million.
Absolutely.
Because if there's only 21 million of them, and I don't know, there's 480 million people in the U.S., and roughly, that could be off a little bit, billions of people around the world. If this was the force of currency, then the value of the full Bitcoin just continues to go higher and higher and higher and higher.
There's a lot of things that have reinforced my belief since I've learned about this. One of the key statistics that really landed for me is, you've probably heard this number, there's about 56 million millionaires in the world. And that number's probably changed since then because of inflation. But let's say 56 million millionaires in the world. There is not a whole coin for every millionaire on Earth. So every person with a net worth over 7 figures is fighting over trying to get a whole coin, not to mention the other 8.5 billion people.
Okay, so a coin is around 70,000, right?
You got it.
So can I go to you and can I go to you today and say, hey man, I want to buy a coin and give you $70,000 and I've got a coin?
So you could do that with an exchange. What I run is a mining company. So we're actually doing is what you just described is, I'm going to go to the market and buy a Bitcoin. I want to take dollars and trade them for Bitcoin. That's how most people do this. They go to like a Coinbase or a Kraken or some other exchange and do that. What we actually do is we build the data centers and then would actually sell you the equipment, the miners, and run them in our data centers for you to mine Bitcoin. So instead of going and taking your after-tax dollars and buying Bitcoin on the market, you're actually purchasing physical equipment. So you get 100% bonus depreciation if you're a business. And then you're producing Bitcoin not at the market price, but at the cost of production. So instead of buying for 70,000 on the market, you're actually taking electricity, running it through your miner, and then producing Bitcoin for the cost of those input materials, which right now is around 50,000. So you're actually getting Bitcoin at a discount when you choose to mine it, and operating like a business where you get tax deductions, have the chance to sort of optimize your procurement. If you do this over a long enough time period, you actually outperform the amount of Bitcoin that you can purchase with the same amount of capital upfront on the market. So think of it like And this is part of why I was drawn into mining. It's sort of like the real estate in the Bitcoin mining, or it's the real estate of the Bitcoin world. You have something physical that throws off Bitcoin cash flows, that has some operating expenses, has a depreciation schedule, that gives you the same asset exposure, but in a novel way that can actually benefit you as a business owner and a high earner.
So where do you come into play? What do you do?
We actually handle the hard part, which is finding the energy and building the data center and keeping the machines online. So think of us as like the operating partner to any other Bitcoin mining business. And I say Bitcoin mining business, that can mean, an individual that's just got a couple miners with us. That can mean private equity firms that have hundreds or thousands with us. It really can look many different ways, but essentially we are the operating function of a Bitcoin mining business for investors who want exposure to the asset class.
Okay. So break that down to me. If I came to you and I was like, hey, Beau, I need some Bitcoin. How does that work? Walk me through that cycle.
So you'd come to me and say, I really want to mine some Bitcoin. And I would say, great. Thank you for joining the greatest movement in human history. You're part of the revolution now. You would actually buy a miner from us. Anywhere from these things run from $5,000 to $10,000, kind of depending on the efficiency of the machine as well as the market conditions. So we see machine prices change pretty much every day based on the cost of Bitcoin. You buy a machine, let's say it's $7,000, and then you've got operating expenses every month that you're paying for. You're paying for power, you're paying for cleaning, maintenance, making sure that your uptime is maintained, making sure that this thing is producing Bitcoin as close to 24/7, 365 as possible. And that costs $225 a month per machine. And then what you're creating, what you're getting is all of the Bitcoin that machine produces, which right now, anywhere from 250 to let's say $400 in Bitcoin. So you're actually getting the Bitcoin yourself. You're not trusting me to hold on to it. I don't actually even know in most cases how much Bitcoin you're mining. You get to keep all of it, and it's your asset. So just to recap, you have a machine. It lives in one of our data centers in Oregon. We're keeping it online for you, but you keep all of the Bitcoin that it mines.
Okay. So I buy the computer from you. You set it up. It's in your data center. You're doing the mining. The machine is doing the mining for me. You're cleaning it. You're maintaining it. You're putting it all together. Okay, cool. I understand that. How much Bitcoin does it produce on a daily, monthly, yearly basis?
A single machine right now, and this fluctuates because the network is sort of always adjusting. This would be its own probably hour conversation to talk about how many different variables go into Bitcoin mining. But give or take, most efficient machines right now are mining like 0.04 to 0.05 Bitcoin in a year.
So how many years does it take me to get a full Bitcoin?
With a single machine, you probably will never get there.
Okay.
So to get a full Bitcoin in a year, you'd be running about 25 machines. And the reason I say it'll never get there is because, like I mentioned, Bitcoin has this halving baked in. So we know the monetary issuance schedule for the next 115 years. Every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that a miner makes on balance gets cut in half, because it's a diminishing, essentially an exponentially diminishing supply schedule. So every 4 years, the amount of Bitcoin that's getting released every 10 minutes gets cut in half. Right now, we're at 3.125 Bitcoin every 10 minutes getting released. In 2028, that gets cut in half to 1.6, and then several decimals after that. And then again, every 4 years in 2032 and 2036. So that machine that you deploy today, you're getting let's say 0.05 Bitcoin in the first year. But in 2028, that gets cut in half, let's say 0.025. So you're looking to, if you're mining, essentially break even in Bitcoin terms within the first, let's call it 2 to 3 years. And then those back 3 to 4 years are going to be where you start to outperform and actually earn more Bitcoin than if you purchased on day one with that same amount of capital up front. But think of it, a great analogy, even though I come from real estate, the oil field analogy helps a lot of people. You've got the first couple of years of production on a oil investment. Usually there's a diminishing curve of how much production comes out of that same well. And you expect to essentially make everything back within the first year or two. And then the later years are just sort of the cherry on top.
Sure.
You're not really depending on them. They're nice to have. It's very similar with miners. You've got a few years of very high production, and then later years where, because of the way the network works, you are making less and less in Bitcoin terms, but not necessarily less and less in dollar terms if we've got enough positive price action in the Bitcoin itself.
Okay, I get it. That's cool. And when you have these Bitcoins, they go into your Bitcoin wallet, and then you trade them?
I would say the best thing you can do is just hold them.
Okay.
I mean, if you really grok what this is, it's meant to be the last trade that you ever have. It is your long-term savings account. It's your bedrock asset. It's not meant to be traded. And I think this is between the Bitcoin and the crypto space, this is kind of where people get messed up, I think, when they are exposed to just crypto more broadly. There's so much of a trading and leveraging and yield farming and sort of fast money culture in the crypto movement. And I think it does a disservice to people who are looking at Bitcoin for the first time, because this is truly a long duration asset. This should take the place of your intergenerational real estate that you're passing to your family in terms of how you're thinking about it. It is the best savings vehicle that we've ever come up with. And trading it is, I think, short-sighted.
Okay, good to know. So, it's very, very interesting. There's 21 million Bitcoins. You can make between 0.04 to 0.05 Bitcoins per year on a machine. What happens if my machine dies? Or it needs to be upgraded, or a new, faster model comes out? How often am I replacing this machine?
That's part of why we're here.
Okay.
So you can expect, I would say, every 5 to 6 years, you should budget that it's time to get a new machine. That's usually their economic life. Even if they've got more physical lifespan in them, you can usually plan 5 to 6 years that your machine's not going to be as competitive. And so that matches up very well with the depreciation schedule. Usually, if you don't take 100% bonus depreciation in year one, you're doing a 5-year accelerated depreciation. So year 5 lines up with the end of your depreciation schedule, and also probably the end of the economic life in most cases. So you should plan to replace a machine about every 5 years. Along the way of that 5 years, things are going to go wrong. I mean, fans are going to break, control boards will break, things will happen. And this was part of my wife and I, when we were first getting into mining, we didn't know all of this. And we lost $500,000 with another host who was doing what we were doing, just far worse. And one of the things that we recognized was it's so easy to get started in this. And then once you start working with somebody, you're essentially locked in because they have all of your equipment, and they pretty much have the pricing power over what they charge you for parts and labor. And we got a $30,000 repair bill that was just the last straw for us, with really never having computers come online. So when we built the service, we said, we're going to do pretty much exactly the opposite of that. We're going to have everything be all-inclusive. We're going to take care of spare parts. We're going to take care of maintenance. We're going to take care of technician labor. All of these things that we got nickel and dimed with that completely ruined our unit economics, we're just going to include in the service. So anything happens in the first year, everything is just fully covered under warranty. After that, the only thing that we pass on is just the pass-through cost of a power supply or a hash board if that needs to be replaced. But what's great is we operate in Oregon. So this is one of the benefits of working with us, is that most miners end up in Texas or Georgia or somewhere in the Southeast where there's great energy rates, but unfortunately a very harsh climate for computing equipment. Being in Oregon, we've got one of the best climates. There's a good reason why almost every hyperscaler has multiple data centers up here, is because the environment is very friendly to computing equipment. It's pretty cool year round. There's not a lot of particulate in the air. We have very stable energy supplies. We have a huge mix of renewable hydropower, so pricing is relatively stable. very low natural disaster risk. And that just translates to extra years on the back end of the lifespan of your machine and fewer maintenance issues along the way. So not only have we built it to be all inclusive for people, but also we've set it up in an environment where you're going to have the fewest things possible go wrong over the life of the investment. And if anything does go wrong, everybody's fully covered by insurance under our policy, which is very unique in the industry. Most hosts would not do this.
Okay, so it sounds like you've built an incredible platform. All that sounds very, very cool. I love the backup. I love the fact that you're not nickel and diming. I love the insurance factor. I love the warranty. Like, all that sounds incredible. But let's back up. You said you lost $500,000 by working with somebody like you, basically, right? Not you, but somebody who was in business to mine Bitcoin. They sold you some computers. They got you set up, and it never really worked, and it was just basically a scam.
You got it right.
Wow.
It was all at once the worst experience that I've ever had in business. And this was also, this started happening weeks after I had proposed to my wife, my now wife. Thankfully, that all worked out. We still were able to have a wedding, but, it really put a damper on pretty much everything that we were going through at that point. It was like
losing $500,000. That's a lot. That's a big hit, brother.
Yeah, no comment on that. It was painful. It was very painful.
Have you recovered that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think, it's easy to be, we have several years of separation from this experience, right?
Right.
And the business has been extremely successful. I wouldn't have built what I built without that experience. Full stop. And it's so easy to want to build a company just to build a company, but there's a different level of investment and care that goes in when you feel like you're protecting future people from a pain that you've already experienced.
It's like a mission.
It really does. It becomes a mission. And you'll find that a lot through the Bitcoin space, is there's, of course, a profit motive for a lot of people getting in, but once they've really dug deeper, realize that this is probably one of the most profound humanitarian missions that we can all be on, is upgrading the money that the world uses. And that might take people a little bit to come around to and understand, but that, I think, is a pretty common belief in the Bitcoin space. So This was my personal mission, aligned with the overall Bitcoin mission, but specifically aligned with helping people not experience the pain that I did.
Well, that's amazing. And, I'm a big believer in build, measure, learn, right? So, you built, you measured, you learned, you went back, you made the adjustments. Those adjustments led to you building the business. The business that you've built is based to serve people and help people. That's the best kind of business. That's the kind of business that takes you to the next level and also takes their investment to the next level. So without that pain and that trial, you would have never had the foresight or probably the ability to dive deep and build a company that's really built for people. And it sounds like you've really built a business for people, which is pretty incredible, especially down to the insurance. So, I mean, it seems incredible what you've built. I have to say that when I think of Bitcoin mining, and this is going to make me sound like a Neanderthal, but the truth of the matter is that, have you ever seen the movie Zoolander?
Yes.
Okay, so there's this scene in the movie where they're like, it's in the computer, and the two guys are there, and they've got the computer, and they're knocking on it, and they're banging it, and they're trying to get it, and this, like, they don't even turn it on. That's like my little Bitcoin miners are going to work in the Zoolander movie. You know what I mean? But it's not like that at all, right? This is a systemized process, and it's pretty cool. My question is, I guess I'm doing movie references today. What happens if we go totally Skynet on this thing and the power goes out? What if there is no power? What if there's some sort of nuclear war? Or what if what happens if there's a natural disaster and there's no power to the data center? What happens to that bit mining and that equipment and that data set? What happens to all that?
Well, the kind of glib answer would be, you got bigger problems at that point than what's going on with Bitcoin. To give you a little bit more technical of an answer, if you wanted to shut off the Bitcoin network you would have to cut power around the world, cut internet around the world, and cut radio frequencies around the world. I think people don't even recognize it. It is an internet protocol, but you can run this on short band radio. So short of a
Okay.
persistent nuclear event all over the world forever into the future, this network will be cockroach money and will come back, or never leave, as long as you leave it. And this is why it's so important that this exists all over the world. I mean, I'm in Oregon. There's people doing this off grid in Africa. There's people in Southeast Asia doing this. This is an open protocol anybody can participate in. And as long as one person with one computer is running this network, it is alive.
Okay, that's
cool.
Pretty
profound.
So if Oregon gets nuked and you survive, you can head up to Seattle, or you can go down to Vancouver, or you can get over to Fresno. As long as you can get an internet connection or a short, wave radio band, whatever, you can still monitor, run, and drive this program. And that's not going to happen all over the world. Like, there could be one catastrophe in one particular region of the world, as there always is on a continual basis. But because of this thing being worldwide, it's really protecting people worldwide. All right, that's a good answer. I'm gonna go all in on that answer. I like it. That makes sense to me. One of the things you mentioned earlier was this idea of other cryptos or crypto trading or other things out there. I have no idea what any of those other things are, but
good.
But as we think about that, what is the difference between Bitcoin and these other versions of crypto?
There's a lot. The simple short answer is that Bitcoin is based on a fair open launch and proof of work. Those are the two pretty defining characteristics. And when I say fair open launch, it's back to what we were discussing earlier. Most other crypto projects have a CEO, a foundation, a board of directors. They operate much more like companies than protocols.
Okay.
They have protocols, they own protocols, but they function much more like a software company than a monetary system. The other aspect of this is proof of work, which most people don't understand, but it's probably the most profound innovation that gives Bitcoin its weight. And when we say it's backed by energy, what we're really saying is it's backed by proof of work. Proof of work is a system that guarantees that it is difficult to validate the network. It's difficult to do the work to actually secure the network, but it's easy to prove that you've done the work. So it's a way of us imbuing it with real world energy, real world work to secure the network that anybody can verify and participate in. And if you compare that to other crypto protocols, there's usually a very common alternative to proof of work is proof of stake, which essentially, instead of the people who do the work make the rules, is the people who have the most money make the rules. That's what you're essentially saying, is I get voting power based on how much of the asset or how much of the network I own. And that is the way that we validate the rules and transactions, which inevitably over the long term leads to capture by the richest versus a fair and open system where those who are participating actually help set the rules. So those are the two big differences. There's, at this point, I think like 20 million other cryptocurrencies out there. I've stopped counting and stopped really paying any attention. And for anybody who's sort of early in this journey, I would advise people to really just learn about Bitcoin for at least like the first year of you trying to unpack this stuff. If it's all new to you and it's unfamiliar, learning about Bitcoin will give you such a better reference point and mirror for everything else so that you know what you're looking at. If you just go in trying to parse the top 100 coins and understand what each one of them does, I think it's going to be overwhelming and it's going to be a loss of signal. There's a reason why Bitcoin is more than 60% of the entire crypto market cap, is because it has gained the critical mass. It has gained the network effect. It has recruited hundreds of billions of physical infrastructure capital like us, doing these things to make sure that it survives, that no other network has amassed. And there's lots of reasons for that, but chiefly are those two that I just mentioned.
That's very, very cool. I could feel like I could talk to you forever about this. There's so many things I'd love to dive into. Like, how did you recover from the 500K? What's the worst thing you've been through? I mean, there's so many things we could talk about that we haven't talked about. But this has been I think this has been an amazing breakdown of Bitcoin, an amazing breakdown of what you do as I'm just going to call you an industry leader, as running this business and building a business to help people. And I think for sure, if I was going to get into Bitcoin mining, I don't know that I would want to work with anybody but you. I mean, you're very smart, you're very genuine, you've been through the 500K thing is tough. You've been through that. You've built a business that really supports people, and it just seems like an incredible thing. I mean, I got to tell you, I was leery on this show, right? Like, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I was thinking to myself, okay, this is going to be interesting. Let's see. And you've walked me through every one of the questions, and I have to say that after spending 45 minutes with you, I'm a believer in Bitcoin, and I've got a long way to probably learn. But you may have just changed my life forever. I'm definitely going to do some sort of Bitcoin investing at this point. I don't know if I'm going to buy a machine or buy a Bitcoin, but I'm definitely going to do something like this. You've turned me into a believer. I'm going to give you some credit on that. You've done a fabulous job of walking through this. I mean, you're definitely intelligent. So I love that. And I think anybody out there that wants to get into this should have a conversation with you. Is that something that you're open to? Is that something that, hey, reach out to Beau, have a conversation? I mean, you don't want to be talking to people all day long about Bitcoin probably, but, have the same conversation over and over again. But how can people reach out to you?
Well, to be clear, that's what we do.
Okay.
And I didn't really mention this. Hopefully it came across. I really care about education. My team cares about education. It's one of our core values is helping people through this. So what I will say is almost 2 out of 3 clients have never set up a Bitcoin wallet who work with us.
Wow.
So I didn't plan for this. I wasn't seeking to do this in the beginning. I'm very happy and rewarded to do this. But we're often helping people just get their first, sense of comfort around this industry, around this asset, and walking them from really 0 to 1 in I know nothing to, okay, I can confidently hold Bitcoin and understand what I hold and participate in this. So I say that because people still will be intimidated by this just because of a lack of understanding. And that's kind of what we're built for, is not just keeping machines online, not just helping you earn Bitcoin and participate in the mining process, but really helping you understand what you own. Because to me, the most valuable thing, other than personal experience and losses that have driven me toward action, is the education that I've gotten. And that really, if we're going to boil it down to something that I'm really passionate about, it's helping people build a life of abundance. And I think that the winners, especially over the next decade, will be the people who understand 2 really key things that most of us never examine, but we depend on every day. That is energy and money. How those 2 things interact, how they're evolving, how all of the shifts that are happening in our world right now, on some level, settle to that. Whether you're talking about computing, the changing in the financial system, AI, it's all connected. So as much as I'm happy to just talk to people about getting a miner and what benefit that brings, to me, selfishly, it's a vehicle to educate you about where the world is going and what's actually happening. And for me, it was this sort of keystone unlock to understand the fundamental forces that shape a world that most people don't understand and feel kind of lost in. And unlocking the ability for people to navigate that a little bit better is one of my personal passions and one of my team's passions. So all that said, if you like mining as a vehicle to learn that kind of stuff, or you're thinking about it as an investment, my team would be happy to talk to you. I do hop on calls every now and then, but thankfully I would be the bottleneck if it were always me. But my team can always get on a call with you at our website, abundantminds.com. There's book a call links so you can get directly on a call with them. The other way that you can engage with us, you mentioned there's no way that you could start to unpack this in 45 minutes. There's so much that we didn't cover. So we do have a lot of educational videos on our YouTube channel. If you just search Abundant Minds, you'll find our social handles on pretty much every platform.
I love it. All right, this is my final movie analogy. for the show. Right now, this is going to make Ralph happy. I feel like Luke Skywalker in the first Star Wars movie. I call it the first Star Wars movie Star Wars. I know there's other movies, but I feel like Luke Skywalker. I've got my little white robe on. I'm on the plane with Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he's got the little blindfold on me, and I'm that little machine is shooting things at me, and it keeps hitting me. I'm just on the path. The Force is with you. Harrison Ford walks over and says, "Do you really believe in all that crap?" And he says, "Yeah, there's something bigger out there." That's where I'm at on the journey. I'm actually on the boat. I'm out of the sand dunes. I'm believing in the Jedi Force. You did a fantastic job explaining it. Did I kill the whole show?
You have to come out to a site visit, because we do these site visits about every month at the data centers. And what you'll love when you get there is that every one of our pieces of infrastructure is named after a planet in the Star Wars universe.
I love it. That's awesome, man. That's so cool. I mean, it's that's pretty awesome. So my Luke Skywalker analogy resonates.
Our company is we're a company is a lot of things, but it's a very Star Wars forward culture.
Yeah, that's cool. All right. So being a Star Wars guy company, do you like my analogy?
I thought it was perfect.
All right, I like it. All right, I like it. That's how I feel right now. Someday I'll be a Jedi Master like you. I'm learning from the Obi-Wan over here. It's beautiful. I mean, dude, I got so many notes on my paper here. I don't even have room for any more notes. So at that, I'm going to have to bring this in for a close because I don't have any room to digest anymore. But this has been fantastic. If you're out in the audience today and you're listening to this, listen, reach out to these guys. Abundant Minds, off the charts. Get into their YouTube. Take them up on a site visit. I mean, I think this is just a world-class opportunity with a world-class organization. And in meeting with thousands of entrepreneurs and thousands of CEOs, you don't find many as really as authentic as you and really as knowledgeable in what the business is. So I think that is just absolutely incredible. And I would say, get in there and do it. Like, I got to do this. I got to put this together myself, because if I don't, I know I'm going to shortchange myself in the long run. So it's just incredible. So if you're out there and you're listening, take a look, dive in, get deep, hook up with Beau, his team, and the team at Abundant Minds. Absolutely off the charts. This has been the Entrepreneurial Journey. I'm your host, Dave Wescott. We are back 9:15 a.m. Pacific Standard Time every single Tuesday. If you like the show, give us a like, give us a share, drop your comments in the comment box, and we're going to cut right there. Ralph, you're going to have to fix this because I forgot to ask my most favorite question, because I got so wrapped up in this whole thing that I've got to ask one more question, which is, we've got a huge billboard on the side of the road. We've got a whiteboard, a billboard on the side of the road. You can share one phrase, one sentence, one word with the entire world. What do you want to share?
Stay curious.
Stay curious. I love it. Stay curious. All right, Beau, this has been an amazing show. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for the last hour.
Thank you, Dave. This was a journey. It was a super fun one.
It was fun, and may the Force be with you.
And also with you.
Every CEO's journey has its Everest. The moments when the path forward feels steep, uncertain, and alone. With Sherpa CEO coaching, you don't climb alone. Our experienced coaches are your guides, helping you break through barriers, sharpen your strategy, strengthen your leadership, and build a team that can carry you higher. With tailored one-on-one coaching, strategic planning, and real accountability, your summit is within reach. Sherpa CEO Coaching, your guide to confidence, clarity, and extraordinary business growth. Get coached and learn more at sherpaceo.com.